Hey everybody, it's Brooks here, Senior Pastor, First Baptist Church of the Islands. Thank you for joining me for today's Monday Focus. So, in Scripture, there's a fella that is not often heard of. He's not often studied. His name is Archippus. And we don't know a whole lot about him necessarily, but we do find that Paul mentions him in his letter to the Colossian believers. Now, here's the thing about Archippus. We don't know a lot about him. Many scholars believe that he may have been the son of Philemon, right, that we read in the book by that name. But undoubtedly, he was a companion of Paul's to some degree. At least Paul definitely knew of him. And we find that Paul is giving him a really strong encouragement here in Colossians chapter 4, verse 17, that has some ramifications for our lives as well. Paul says in the letter to the Colossian believers in chapter 4, the very last chapter in verse 17, he says, "Say to Archippus, take heed to the ministry which you have received in the Lord, that you may fulfill it." Take heed to the ministry that you have received in the Lord, that you may fulfill it. Now, there's something interesting there, because what Archippus may have needed was some encouragement to look in his life, to take heed, to take a look at the ways that God had gifted him, the way that God had given him special talents, maybe certain experiences in life, the way God had molded him personality-wise, for him to take a look at that and to determine, you know what, I'm going to use these gifts and these talents and these experiences in this life that God has given me in the context of ministry. And that's what God calls for every single one of us. He calls us to take heed, take a look, see how God has equipped us, what He's done in our lives in the past, some of the experiences that we've experienced, some of the talents that He's given us, some things that He's placed in our care, in our possession, and to ask ourselves, how can we use this in a way that ministers? You see, ministry is not so much us doing things for God, it's more God doing what He desires through us as we yield ourselves to Him and use the resources He's given us, mainly the lives that He's given us. And so we need to take heed. We need to ask ourselves, because here's the thing, we often find ourselves being a little more comfortable on the sidelines watching ministry as it unfolds, rather than putting ourselves in the game and saying, God, would you use me to make a difference for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of Jesus? Just this past week or two, we had one of our own, Richard, who did a lot of work around the exterior of our church. I mean, he pressure washed this whole property, just about, it seemed. And he used the gifts and talents. Richard can do just about anything with his hands. He's very skilled. And he used those talents in the context of ministry. On any given week, we have people teaching Bible studies. We have folks sitting down with children. We have those that are pouring into preschoolers or hanging out with students, folks that are using their gifts in ladies' ministry, reaching single moms or mothers in general, and in so many other areas. We got folks on our finance team that have a finance background, and the list goes on, and they're using their lives to make a difference. They've taken heed to the ministry that God has ultimately given them, that they might fulfill it, just like Paul tells Archippus to do in Colossians chapter 4, verse 17. So why don't you today let this be your focus? Ask yourself, how has God uniquely equipped me? What are some of my talents? What are some of my gifts? What are some of the things that I like, that I enjoy? What do I do vocationally? What are some of the experiences that I've been through that I can maybe help someone else get through in their own lives? What has God placed in my care? What resources do I have? And then ask yourself, how can I use that in the context of ministry? Ask God to show you. Ask God to give you opportunities. And then open your eyes and buckle up and walk through the doors that God opens so that you can impact other people. Right? Not jealous of the way another person does it, not jealous of how other people are able to minister, but taking heed to the ministry God has given to you so that you can fulfill it, honor Him, and reach people for the sake of the gospel. That's your Monday focus. God bless you.